There's an unwritten rule after a good weight support. You act like it was all you as a leader. This is this right here. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 23 years and I have about 25. So tonight we are taking a look at PJ and Lemery from Mad Jam, and we're talking about some weight supported moves.
I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat. Go ahead and give it a watch. When you're done, we'll get to analyzing.
Going into this, because we're talking about weight supported moves, and that is something that you see fairly frequently. However, weight supported moves, you tend to see them look a little bit unbalanced or not quite stable because people don't quite understand the mechanics of it. So we want to take a look at that, but also one of the things that I want to mention is there is there's talk in the community that, follows tend to not feel safe with weight supported moves with partners that they don't frequently dance with or haven't danced with before, or even sometimes with people that they do dance with frequently. And I want to talk about how we can make that better, because I think that weight supported moves are great. They're really fun. They don't have to be a part of the dance at all. But I think that if you're going to incorporate them as a follow, you should be able to feel safe doing that. And as a lead, you should know how to be very stable and give your follow a good sense of, comfort going into something that they are not fully control over. So,
right. That actually brings up a good point. That reminds me, because there's also the other side where some follows tend to throw themselves into weight supported moves without the leader having led them. And that is just as dangerous as a leader leading something incorrectly. So definitely want to talk about how to prevent death this evening.
We
want to have a good time. Do the screen share.
So we're taking a look at this first move. Now, this is kind of a variation on like an around the world dip. And I say variation because Lemery has one foot fully off the ground. Generally with around the worlds, like both feet are touching the floor, but one is not necessarily weighted the whole time. It kind of switches. Mm-hmm. But because she has one foot off the floor this whole time, it puts it into like a fully weight supported move that needs to be balanced correctly in order for it to turn out well. Mm-hmm. So PJ has to make sure that he is leading this correctly once he realizes that her foot is not on the floor. And so he's going into this just normally, but I would assume that because he would feel extra weight, he would kind of adjust as he's going through.
Mm-hmm. And for those who are watching the recording, the Fever choreography that we analyzed has two different kind of more standard around the world dips. One smaller in the beginning and one like that goes all the way, but she is on both feet at the end. So that's a good follow-up video to see about around the worlds.
Yes, agreed. Now, so what needs to happen here is this needs to be balanced based on what they're both doing with their hips, mainly. Mm-hmm. So with Lemery, because she has one leg up, and she, because of that, needs to give PJ her full weight, she needs to do it in a manner that really easily adds that mass to his body mass, basically. And so that's going to be with the like hip area because that's what's staying connected the whole time. And so she is like, as she's going into this, she is releasing back, but she's also allowing the hips to move forward, like putting pressure like into PJ.
It's a really good, like, you can see how her right leg is very much forward in between his, and then his knees are forward past her right knee.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're sharing a center. And that's like really crucial for and around the world. It's like basically both partners are Neo in the Matrix is essentially what's going on. You're just also you're attached to each other.
Yeah.
And then from a leader's perspective, the thing that cues me watching this, but I also assume PJ would be able to feel this in the connection. The thing that is different going into this is this weight transfer right here onto Lemery's right foot.
Yeah.
So first of all, it doesn't go past PJ's right foot. It stays closer to his right foot. And she goes up on releve vertically over that foot and then kind of lilts past it,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it really clear that PJ is dealing with a different center of mass, center of gravity situation in her to
Mm-hmm.
be able to manage it. That being said,
Yeah.
I know Lemery is incredibly strong, so it's not like he's 100% supporting her weight. It's just changing the positioning of how he
Mm-hmm.
handles it. In a normal around the world dip, if you think of pelvises and legs, you kind of get one leg offset from each other. So your right feet are respectively in between the other person's feet. But
Mm-hmm.
in this one, Lemery is very much off to PJ's right. And she ends up essentially like sitting on his upper thigh. And
Yeah.
that dictates where he's putting his mass. And by that, I mean where his butt is going. So usually in a
Yeah.
normal around the world, it's very simple. You sit straight down and back as a leader, like you're doing a squat at the gym. But
Mm-hmm.
because Lemery is over this side, he's actually sending his butt back into his left to counter the fact that she is in front of him to his right.
I want to mention that because you said that PJ, the way that she kind of goes into that initial step,
Mm-hmm.
he would realize something is different. From this position, Lemery could go into just like a normal around the world. Like she could put that foot down
Mm-hmm.
when he is starting to put her into that dip. She could totally do that.
Mm-hmm.
So PJ at this point would just really need to be paying attention because she could do either. And so he just needs to make sure he's ready to adjust to which she chooses to do.
Right. I think the point I was trying to make is that it would be awkward for her to suddenly go to the normal version
Yeah.
because that would involve her kind of like reversing a little bit, being like up and then back away. But the way she's really pushing herself forward onto this foot is creating an arc in like that direction. And so it's that intention of where the body mass is going, that it's going up
Mm-hmm.
at an angle. And then that's what I would notice as a leader, that's where the mass is going. And that's important everywhere in West Coast Swing as a leader, not just in weight
Yep.
supported moves, to be really cognizant of what direction the follows mass is going, because it's not
Mm-hmm.
always parallel to the ground.
Yeah.
In fact, in a standard just like side pass, the follow center is doing a really long elongated infinity arc. um, and that's how the energy keeps going because it's being redirected with that arc at the end.
Yep.
And so understanding the arcs of the follow center of mass is really important. And in this particular weight transfer, like, be like, oh, she's still going up. So I want to allow that arc to finish naturally. And then the other thing is, because of that, well, not necessarily because of it, but I just wanted to highlight that his left hand is over top of her right shoulder, whereas it is standard around the world, both of the leaders' hands are on the back like that, just on either side. And so that's another detail of how this is different than from a standard.
So I think the important thing with this is because it isn't like a standard around the world, both of them are A, ready to adjust, but B, not changing their intentions like partway through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because that is something that happens with weight supported movements when you see them not work out super well, or just, be kind of unstable, is one partner will intend to do something but then like change their mind halfway
Mm-hmm.
through, and so it becomes really awkward for the other partner to adjust. So that's one of those things, like you were saying, like it would have been more awkward for her to go into like a more normal type of around the world from this position, but it's something that I, there is kind of an option of her doing, is just kind of releasing that free foot and placing it on the floor. And that would change things a little bit. Knowing Lemery and like how she's going into this, she's not going to change that. She's very clear with what she's doing. But because there's always that option, had he had a different follow, that could have happened. And he would have
Mm-hmm.
had to do more adjusting.
Mm-hmm. This is where like just clarity of intent is so
Yeah.
important, regardless of what role you're in. Like, of course, it's your
Mhm.
prerogative, your right to abort or to change something. But
Right.
understanding that sudden changes like that add enough variables that it's very likely that there's going to be some stumbling points to regain connection.
Mm.
Um, and especially in a weight supported move, if you're with someone that you trust less, regardless of what role you're in, the more important it is that you're really clear and you're not adding more and more variables to adjust
Yeah.
something. Like,
Right.
if for example, if I'm a leader and I am bringing a follow into a weight supported move and there's some awkwardness to it, I would not change the type of weight support move I am doing. I would instead shift how I'm connecting to create more stability
Yeah.
in my original intent. Um, is that kind of the same way you would approach it from a follows perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that.
Then before we move on to the next one, the last thing I want to highlight is just PJ's feet. So he's lilting with her, and you can see how he is shifting his right foot forward to get it past Lemery's, not only down line but towards us in the camera. And that is helping him shift their shared center over to where she is, because she's not continuing to progress because of where she had placed her right foot. And then he squats at that angle, like I was talking about. And the further into the dip that they get, the more his mass shifts to his left foot to counter her. So you'll see very shortly that the heel of his left foot is going to come off the ground, because you can see how much he is bending his knee past his toes. And there's a certain point where, just mechanically, it doesn't make sense to demand that much flexion in the foot mechanically. Your body
Right.
can only do so much. And so he's lifting the heel to compensate because of how much he had to shift his weight over that foot in a squatted position.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Does Lemery have a ballet background?
I think so.
Okay, it makes sense because like this pic so pretty.
It is. It's really,
So
really
gorgeous.
nice. It is. Shoot,
And
there
then
was one other thing I wanted to say.
there's an unwritten rule after a good weight support. You act like it was all you as a leader. This is this right here. Anyway, sorry.
Great face.
Great face.
The other thing that I wanted to mention was how PJ is making sure that he is staying as upright as he can. He's not trying to lean over towards her. He's really reaching with the arms away from him rather than trying to go with the upper body, because that's going to throw off that balance point that they have going. He really needs all of his weight to be going the opposite direction that Lemery is going. So if he starts, because he feels the need to reach to keep a hold of her in the exact same spot the whole time, he might arc a little bit forward towards her, but that's going to create a really unbalanced movement. And so they're not going to make it through this nicely like they do.
Right. And the reason why optically it may look like he's leaning forward is because his butt's going so far back.
Yeah.
So yes, his shoulders are closer to us than his hips. But that doesn't mean he's leaning forward.
Right. So what you can really see is like his spine is pretty straight, even if he has a slight angle towards her because of where his hips are moving, but there's no curvature to the back. And that's the difference.
Yeah. So we're going to call this the double monkey bar.
Yes, that is more or less what it is. So these are, once again, a little bit of a variation on the way you might normally see them. For a couple reasons. So normally with a monkey bar, the follow will swing through with both feet solidly on the ground. Now Lemery is choosing to alter that just a little bit. So it's based on the way that she's kind of sweeping the foot around and where she's placing that, and then where she's allowing him to move that upper body, right? So she's allowing a more laid back position than you might normally see.
That's where the trust piece is so important, because there's...
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so the reason that she's able to kind of adjust this and have more of her upper body leaned back towards the floor is because she is comfortable with him having her weight. If you are put into a monkey bar as a follow and you're not super comfortable with it, you can make it so that you have all of your weight. You don't have to give your lead any of your weight going through this. You can fully just plant the foot right underneath you and rotate kind of over that and stand up on your own. You don't have to give your lead weight, but because she is very comfortable with his balancing of her weight, she is able to really place that foot in a different spot, and that ends up giving him a lot more weight.
Then I also want to add, if you're someone who can't do any sort of into the knee movement, you can also turn a monkey bar into a duck as a follow if you need to. What I think about when I am initiating a monkey bar as a leader is I'm intending to do the weight supported version, because actually leading the non-weight supported version isn't necessarily a thing you can lead. So it's really up to the follow's discretion whether or not it's going to be weight supported. So I always go into everyone thinking I'm going to take their weight and I'm going to arc it. So I want you to notice where the hand is now and how it arced in this kind of loop-de-loo through the air right there. That arc to the hand is so important. But that's the part where, as a follow, you have the opportunity to be like, hey, I'm not actually going there. And you just squat right down or you duck under, without actually letting your upper body travel through space. It's just down and up at that point.
Yeah. And with this in particular, it requires um, more effort on the lead's part to like smoothly move through it. Now, like I was just saying, the follow can take their own weight, but ideally, the lead should be kind of powering them through that, so that it's like, as a follow, you're just kind of going on the ride. Like you're not necessarily powering through it yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot of strategic momentum that goes into an efficient monkey bar. So, first of all, I want to highlight that arc that I was talking about, that's doing this from our perspective, is also doing that in three-dimensional space. This point is closer to us in the camera than this point. And so the way that you take advantage of the momentum is you accelerate into it. So that way, at this point right here, you're at max momentum, and then you can just ride the energy as it resolves itself out. So, and this is where being timid going into a weight supported monkey bar actually messes with you. You have to go for it, which is another reason why being with a partner you trust for that is super important. Because if you're with a leader who doesn't necessarily know, they think they know, but they don't know, and you throw yourself into a monkey bar, they might not actually be ready to compensate for that. And it can result in trouble. Or as a leader, if you try to force the weight supported version and the follow isn't assisting with that momentum, it can also create problems. It needs to be, we're in this together, or it's not happening.
Exactly. And so that choice of like, as a follow, trusting your partner to give them your weight to, use the momentum to move you through it, or having your own weight, that's something that you need to make like a decision on prior to like going through the movement. Once you feel yourself getting into that type of position, you need to make a choice. Are you going to give them some of your weight, or are you not? If you don't give them some of your weight, then they're not going to have much to control to move you through it. If you do, then they can really smoothly move you through it.
Yeah. Then a couple more details I want to point out. So another thing that is really important is monkey bar is, like we were talking about in the around the world dip, the leader, you sending your hips back because you want to create space so the follow isn't bashing their head into your knees or pelvis. Very important detail. So if you like pay attention to PJ through here, there's more of an arc through his body because he's just trying to get his hips and his knees out of her space that she's moving through. And then what's really important is you need to not do that so much that you then don't have strength to support the weight support part. So it's a kind of a delicate balancing act as a leader. Like, how do you create that space for them while still maintaining your strength to support their weight? And then another detail I wanted to point out of Lemery is how artfully right here she collects her feet and she like displaces her feet. You can see there's like a little split second where neither of them are on the ground, and she's putting her new foot, her left foot, directly underneath her center. So to PJ, it's as if she's still on that same foot. So it created a really smooth transition through which he could then lead her through another one. So, so good.
Yeah. And one thing that I really do want to emphasize is kind of what you were just talking about. For the leads, you have to have a strong base through any type of weight supported movement. If you don't know how to do that, I don't want to say you have no business leading weight supported moves, but you have no business leading weight supported
Yep.
moves.
Yep. I would say something that bothers me, because so many follows who get led in weight supported moves are very small, very thin bodied.
Yeah.
It tends to be quote unquote okay, because there isn't as much weight in the system for a weight supported move. But that's just
Right.
creating poor technique that's going to create problems later. And if you can't do a weight supported move with a lighter follow correctly, you shouldn't do it with a heavier follow at all.
Right.
Never.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to add to that, some follows on their own can more skillfully move through it, even if they are heavier. But, it's really, as a lead, you need to make sure that you feel competent in what you're leading in order to make sure that your follow safely moves through this weight supported move.
Yeah. That reminds me, because sometimes you also hear the term weight assisted, because some teachers distinguish between, like, some might say weight support means full weight support, whereas weight assist means partial weight. So far, I think everything except for like a hot second in a couple of these are weight assisted patterns. It's very rare in this dance that Lemery's full weight is supported by PJ. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Weight supported would be something that you see in the showcase division.
Yeah.
It's not allowed in classic. So,
yeah.
But just in general, most teachers just refer to either or as weight supported. So,
right. All right. Next. I think this is that the no, it's in the next song. I was hearing lyrics for the next song. They do a similar move in the next song.
Yeah. So this is a really lovely dip. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is where PJ has Lemery's left arm. It is wrapped up behind him, and you can see he has that left arm up.
And he does not let go of it.
So then she feels stable to just kind of release into this dip. Now, she's not just dropping straight into it. It is a release. She kind of starts with the head and then lets it kind of sink through the rest of the body. You can see as she lets the hips drop further. Right, so that slow movement. But one thing that I want to note, as a follow, if your lead has your arm in this type of position, you don't change things. If there is an up and over of the arm, don't change things. It's not going to end well.
Yeah, basically, you have become an add-on to the leader's torso, and you move as one unit. So for this next frame through, I want you to pay attention to how perfectly in sync both of their chests are. They're moving at the exact same rate through space. As soon as that little space gets closed in between them. So from here on, they're moving at the exact same rate with their rib cages. And the reason it looks different is because of the head movement and the hair action that she's adding to it. And that's like such an important detail. If she were to be like wriggling next to like the bad news, you become one unit at that point.
Yeah.
Like they have such complete contact. So from his hand, her arm across his back, his arm across her back, and then hand into the armpit. That's like the entire chain has intense connection and stability. So it's nice and comfortable.
Very solid.
That being said, though, just because her hips are moving downwards does not mean she's like, she's not like letting it go,
Right.
because that would also break the chain. So there is control and resistance there. So there's still a semblance of like from her head to her knees, she's one piece, because
Mhm.
that's what allows PJ to lead her effectively.
Yeah. Yeah, if she were to just kind of release the hips and just drop down from this position, what's going to happen is it's going to make it a lot harder for PJ to get her up out of this position.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the control, he can kind of allow her to sit into that dip and then he can redirect it really easily. But if
Mm-hmm.
she just drops straight into that, then you're getting to a point where you're stopping movement. So then he would have to initiate that down up. So it's going to be harder to get out of.
Yep. So well done.
Yeah. Her arm is really, really lovely. And the other nice addition to it is just how much she's going up on her toes. It really adds to the amount of space that she has to release or, kind of sit into it with the hips.
So good. And then because of the complexity from which PJ decides to lead out of this dip, I just want to add how important it is that when you're bringing a follow out of a dip, that you're not twisting their spine. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever shape the follow spine is in, don't add too many variables to it, because that can injure.
Yeah.
So he's letting her come out of it before the rotation happens. So that way her spine can have integrity the whole time. So we're on to the second song now. And this is basically a very similar one, but however, this gets closer to full weight support because of the way her feet slide across the ground.
Yep. Yeah. So the differences with this, so she has two free arms going into this. Now, it is a similar positioning for both of them in terms of just where their bodies are landing. Like she's like directly in front of him, like back to front, basically. But because of the difference of the arm connection, this can change into something different as long as they're gradually moving through that. So now you can see that what happens is they get into this, right? So it's kind of like hip catch position. And then Lemery kind of sinks into it more. And she does so slowly, right? So she doesn't just drop full into this weight supported position immediately. She slowly drops into it. She slowly gives him more weight. And then as they kind of get to the bottom of that, like when she is pretty close to the floor, she then continues that momentum by letting the feet slide out away from her.
I want to highlight, I think, one thing that we're not seeing, because I'm assuming the back of her torso is against his leg. It's not just his arm around her ribs.
Yeah.
So there's that additional support. That's how she's able to release the feet with that extra stability. Because you can even see his fingers open up a little bit right
Yeah.
there. I think he's afraid of touching something he shouldn't. And then also she's using this arm and this hand for extra stability.
Yeah, not to say she's pulling on him, but it's placed there.
Yeah. She's
And she
turning herself into a
also,
more solid piece. Because like if you were to pick up like if you had two like crash test dummies, one that was wobbly and the other that was just like rigid. It's easier to pick up the rigid one than it is to pick up the wobbly one. So as a
Yeah.
follow and any sort of weight supported dip, you're trying to make yourself more solid. And that's why they say it
Mhm.
takes so much strength to be the one being lifted.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also want to add that she also places that right hand on the floor as well. Right. So she has a hand placed on his leg. She reaches out and places that hand on the floor just to help him a little bit. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because when she gets that full extension of the feet, that's a lot of weight. So she gives him a little bit of assistance, and then and she leaves it there until he kind of fully picks up and starts moving her up and out of it.
Mm-hmm. So, like I was talking about with the monkey bar, arcs are your friend. So, having momentum going into the arc so that way it can resolve itself helps so much. Because at for a short time in this move, a lot of Lemery's weight is in PJ's, basically his arm. One of the
Mhm.
things that's helping is the fact that it's not just straight down and then straight out. It's arcing. It's going down, scooping low, and then scooping out. And that's what's helping the energy resolve, because instead of PJ simply having to stand up out of his squat, there's that lateral arc to it that's making it easier to redirect her existing momentum. So it's a way of cheating gravity in a way. So it's easier to do than to just squat down, lift up. Science.
Yep. I also like to point out how concerned both Miles and Dion look.
Wait. So here's Miles. Here's Dion.
They're both like, okay.
They're like magic. And I wonder if part of that is because Lemery really hops into this, but I mean PJ does too. They're both hopping. There's this down
Yeah.
up, like he's very much encouraging it with the handhold, and she's very much
Yeah.
going with it. And so that's
Yeah.
its own arc. It's this up and down kind of rainbow arc, and then it scoops this way. Will you talk about this particular moment as a follow? So when you go from sliding
Mhm.
to placing one ball down, so that way you get traction again.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
Yeah.
we've seen that a lot where follows are missing that piece, and it looks
Yeah.
worrisome.
Yeah. So anytime that as the follow, you're getting put into this kind of laid back position, you, if you get where your feet are sliding out away from you, right, you have to, A, your lead has to make sure to get you up over where those feet are extended to, but B, you also have to help, right? So you can't just let them carry you all the way up, right? It's like when you have your feet in this position, you should have a side of the foot on the floor, right? So then once you are sliding and you get placed like up a little bit more onto your foot, you should be rolling across that foot sideways so that you can get some of your own weight, right? So then that foot that is starting to be rolled across sideways, it gets bent because you're starting to put weight on that, right? So if you are sliding, you have that foot start placing and rolling across, you cannot let that leg stay straight, or else you're not going to get up over that foot.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It has to bend. You can leave one foot, in that straighter position, but you really have to make sure you're rolling up across the feet in order to get your own weight, start getting your own weight. Because when you get into this fully laid out position and you're getting pressed up out of it, it's a lot of weight, right? So you don't want to make your lead have to have all of that weight the whole way through. You want to help as soon as you can.
Amen.
Was that good?
Yes, thank you. Because I'm like, this information needs to be known. And then I would say the only thing, because the very, very tail end of this looks a little awkward. And I just want to highlight why that is. Because of the kind of this like hips forward seaweed position that she's in right here. If this foot were just like half a step further towards the back of the room when it landed, it would be closer to PJ. So right now, Lemery's just a little bit, so minor, just a little bit too close to us in the camera, as opposed to close to him. And that is not necessarily something that they could have course corrected based on the arc of the momentum. It's the difference between, you can see her feet are coming towards this point on the floor instead of this point on the floor. If they were coming towards this back one, that awkwardness wouldn't happen. But this is just getting like beyond nitpicky. And I'm not complaining about what actually happened. I'm just highlighting in case anybody else is like, but what happened? That's what happened.
And also, the other thing that they could have done to avoid it would have been for him to have a little bit more momentum going towards her, like towards her.
Yeah, so she could have gotten up over it sooner.
A little faster. Yeah,
And
but that would have had to happen initially, not once they're mid movement.
Yeah, and would have helped to have a stronger connection instead of just like around her ribs.
Yeah. But they still manage this really beautifully.
Yeah.
And it ends up being overall a really solid weight supported move.
Yep. Does not deserve the skepticism of the leaders in the back, in my opinion. All right. What? They look so scared. Like, I don't know. Like the champion follows in their weight support powers cannot be underestimated because they are so skilled. I still remember one of the times I social danced with Victoria, and it was a late night at a huge event. We had 2 squares on the floor. That was it. I was not planning to do weight supported shit. And she was just like, I'm just gonna do level changes on my own and make it look like you supported me. And every time I was like, how do you do that? Can you teach me this? The wisdom of your knees.
Yep. Not so much champion follows, but like top level skilled follows.
Yeah. Can I have knee surgery now? I miss being able to bend my knees.
What's that?
All right. So we're going into this next one from a push tuck. Just so for some context, because things happen fast. I'm going to put the frame here.
So now this one, it starts out pretty solid, but it gets a little wobbly towards the end. So if you watch going down into it, that's all fine. It's just kind of that coming up out of it where you can see Lemery kind of gets pushed more on one side than the other.
Oh yeah, I see it now. That's funny because I thought the awkwardness was in the front. So we're both showing each other things. Yeah. Oh, you go first.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so what's happening is because of the over rotation that she has on both sides of this beginning of the tuck, she's not going down onto his leg. She's going in front of his leg, right? So the only thing supporting her back is his arm and not arm and leg. So she's just kind of free falling there apart from the arm.
Yep.
And then because of that like angle that she was at, he then kind of has to press up with that elbow and help her get up like straight.
So this is kind of a really great example of what I was talking about earlier with the around the world dip. We were having that conversation about she could have turned it into a normal around the world. However, it would have been a little bit jarring because it would have changed the trajectory of what she was doing. It would have been a sudden like left turn instead of just going straight down the road. And this is an example of like PJ doing that himself. So she's getting a very clear lead to rotate in place. Her momentum is focused on rotating and not traveling. And then all of a sudden she's stopped and redirected in a way that doesn't arc. It's a very sudden, you're no longer rotating anymore. You're just moving in this direction. And that is confusing to follow. Arcs are your friend. So I'm not saying that this stuff isn't possible because clearly they do it here and it turns out fine and it looks lovely. But I'm trying to think of ways where the arc could have continued.
I mean, I don't think that. So the other problem is that that arm above them that they have, her right arm, he releases it. So he initially goes into it. They have their hands connected, right? But then as she drops, he releases that hand. So had they had a little bit of extra support from that hand as well, probably would have gone a little bit better. Right. But because of the positioning that they're in, that's not smart.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to let go of that because he doesn't want to pull her arm back further. So I think I've decided how I would solve the arc problem. Just don't let me forget, okay?
Okay. Okay. I was just going to say, but then the problem that the arm dropping causes is that there's then more weight on that side of her body. So, yeah. It's hard to fix because you don't want your arms in that initial position. You can't let them stay there. It's not safe, but then also it causes more problems because once it drops, she has more weight on that right side of her body because it's more dropping towards the floor than this other left arm that she has more up, right? So that gravity obviously is going to add more weight to that right side.
All right, so here is what I would have done to just smooth it out so we get an arc instead of like a very sudden angular change in direction. So right here, after, is there a name for this position where the leader has like the follower's bicep and the forearm is across the back? Is there a name for that?
I don't remember. I think that there is.
Anyways, this position. So what happens is when he hits connection, he basically starts sending his elbow this way. He lets her left side come forward a little bit, which is great. But I think what it would have made all the difference is to have this breath moment where his whole arm just goes that way ever so slightly before directing into the dip. So you're having a moment to change that rotational momentum that she has to arc out of it, resolve that, and do a little bit of a prep before going into the weight support, just a little bit of a breath, like an inhale before going down. Just little tiny, like an inch, 2 inches, like it's not big. I mean, musically on a slower song, doing something bigger might be appropriate, but it doesn't have to be big to get the same effect. And then that could have then made the resolution of this easier because this is just down up and there's not arc to it, which is also compounding the problem that Alicia was talking about Lemery's weight being too much towards us in the camera for PJ to kind of resolve cleanly, and adding an arc to it would have been a lot better. So instead of straight down, straight up, arcing it. That is the moral of today's story. Arcs are your friend.
Arcs. Yep.
Arc me, baby. Yeah. I should be fired now. I will stop talking. Is there anything else you wanted to add to this one?
I think the only thing that I want to add is, even though it's a little bit wobbly, like, they still do a really good job of managing what they're working with. There's not another way that they really could have moved through it once they were already there. So they did a good job managing it. They got through it. Everything looked fine. You know?
Yeah. Hindsight is 2020.
Right, exactly. Really lovely ways to just all of the ones that we've looked at tonight. Really, really lovely ways to move through weight supported moves, and also a couple really great ways to kind of look at how they moved through when it didn't go so like cleanly.
Yeah. And I just want to add that while we focused on weight support tonight, these dances are excellent. That just happens to be the topic we chose to highlight with these dances, but excellent dancing all around.
Yeah, really nice, very enjoyable. They have great technique overall.
Yep. Really great.
They just had some really nice weight supported stuff that I wanted to look at. So.
Yeah.
What did we decide on to do next?
We are analyzing Jordan and Tatiana's ESS
right,
demo.
Jordan. Right.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing in 2 weeks, I believe, which is when we shall be back. And then we'll have another free episode 2 weeks after that. And we're doing another live workshop, what went wrong, at the end of May. And that Facebook event will exist on Facebook probably next week or so.
Bonnie and Benji. I'm sure you guys know which one.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one to analyze. Anyways, thank you all so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you soon.
See you next time.